Hey, hope you enjoyed the eclipse if it was in your area. It's a dumb way to start a video, but here we are. It was really cool. It was fantastic. I would never travel to go see that. But if you did or would, I hope you saw the eclipse that you wanted to see because it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And speaking of kind of once in a lifetime opportunities, horrible segue. Tell you the truth, horrible segue. I wonder how important spring practice is to college football. And I feel like there's almost tiers to it where and I think it can be broken down upon lines too, right? Whether it's program specific, coach specific, position specific, player specific, how important spring practice is. But when you look at an overarching, okay, like you get this set amount of times that you get to do this in the spring and you go forward after spring practice where the transfer portal will open back up and kind of throw a wrench at everything. It's a weird schedule, weird system where there's just a lot in flux and some things are way more specific to some players and other players, and some things are way more specific to some programs and other programs. It's a really interesting dynamic, I think, because for instance, on the program level, if you are a program with an established head coach and you basically don't have a dramatic change at the coordinator position, like you might have a change at offensive coordinator where that coach is still going to feature the same style of offense or still want to accomplish the same things as maybe the last guy or whatever the case may be. It's really not like it's kind of just going through the motions, right? Now, no coach is ever going to tell you in a press conference, like, yeah, we're just going to come out here these 15 times. And then at the spring game, we're kind of go through the motions, because that's not really exciting. It doesn't really instill a whole lot of trust that you think, okay, this guy leading this thing that I really put a lot of value and importance on in my life isn't necessarily taking this all that seriously. But I think for some programs, like for instance at Georgia, like Kirby Smart is never going to tell you, yeah, we're kind of going through the motions out here in spring practice, get everybody's legs kind of stretched out, get a little bit back in football shape, teach them a few things, get some helmets on, and just go through, some of the basics. You'd be freaking out. You'd be like, wait, what the hell are they doing? But that's the reality. Like, what does Georgia have to? They're not implementing a whole lot defensively, offensively, they aren't already doing. They're breaking in some guys. They're getting them ingratiated into the program, finding out maybe putting something in the back of their heads of like, okay, this guy is going to be a competitor at this spot, etc. But at a program like Georgia or Notre Dame's not changing a whole lot. You don't have a whole lot. LSU, not changing a whole lot. So spring practice isn't this do or die thing that maybe a lot of people think it is. Now, it might be in the transfer portal. And I think it's kind of one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't, that you got to kind of play that game. Like nobody's going to name their starting quarterback after spring practice because you're not trying to run somebody out the door by April 16th. I mean, that's just part of the new age roster management that you have to deal with in college football. There are already reports of, this running back is going to enter the transfer portal once spring practice is over. And it's like, man, that's rough because you tear an Achilles during spring practice and your 2024 season is ruined. But then at the same time, you don't want the coaches ragging on you. You don't want to put your scholarship in flight. There's so many things up in the air when it comes to spring practice that I don't know that you can ever get a really good feel on. Everybody's going to tell you their spring practice. It's the same thing as National Signing Day. We got our guy. We got the guys that we wanted to get. We got really good players today. We got much better. That's the same thing they're going to tell you on signing day. Nobody's going to say like, hey, or it's the same thing they're going to tell you about spring practice. Nobody's going to tell you like, we didn't get everything done that we wanted to get done. I really was looking forward to doing this, that. You just don't. You're not going to get that from somebody when it comes to spring practice. But for really already established programs, when you've got things, if you're in year 5 or 6 of a head coaching tenure and the strategy offensively, the style defensively has not changed, spring practice is kind of just like it's basically the last time on show you've been binge watching. Like it's kind of that 60-second recap that happens over the course of a couple of weeks. Like, hey, just a reminder, here are the coaching points. Here's what we're trying to get done. Let's work on technique. Let's work on fundamentals, etc. Now, other programs that will have, hey, we're going to really change things offensively. We're going to take a different approach to this where we might want to run the ball a little bit more this year. Instead of zone blocking, we're going to put hat on a hat and we're going to try to shove guys out of the way blocking. Spring practice then becomes really important because you're kind of putting that precursor into once we get the pads on in the fall, we need to be at this point already. Like, I can't be teaching this. I can't, like, we could be working on technique. I need to be working on technique. And I need to be working on advanced. Like, I need to be in offensive line 402 by August 1st comes along, rather than, all right, kids, so when I say pull, that means the guard's going to go from here. Like, you just can't. So you got to get some of that stuff done in spring practice, which kind of puts you somewhat at a disadvantage when your competition is like, all right, everybody remember what a slant route is? Yes, I do, coach. Like, they're working on things that are situational or whatever the case may be, where spring practice at a new regime or hey, we're going to do things differently this year, etc. Or maybe somebody that's on the hot seat is going to say, hey, this is the approach that we're going to take. What we're going to try to do is X, Y, Z, because we got to change it up because I got to save my job. You're somewhat at a disadvantage of being kind of behind the 8 ball just a little bit, of instead of using those practices to your advantage to get a leg up on practice on September 15th rather than August 1st. Some of these teams are worried about getting stuff done in preparation for the first day of fall camp when they need to really be a couple of weeks ahead of schedule at that point. But then from a position standpoint, if you're an established quarterback, is spring practice a little different for you rather than you go to somewhere where the competition is up in the air? Now, again, every coach is going to tell you every competition is up in the air. Nobody's got a cemented place in our starting lineup, which is malarkey. It's poppycock bull crap. Every coach in America right now has an idea of, if we were to play tomorrow, who would my starting quarterback be? And generally, the guys in the room know that. The players know who's got a beat on the job. Any player who will tell you or will say, I had no idea who was going to be our starting quarterback, I was shocked, is lying. They know, and they have an opinion on who that person should be, whether they agree with the head coach or not. They have an idea of who the better of the 2 or 3 or 4 guys competing for that spot is. They know who the best player is. They know who should and should not be the starter, or at least they have an opinion on that. But even that is a position by position thing, right? Where if you've got a new wide receivers coach, unless you're throwing in an entirely new offense, your spring practice is, for the most part, just trying to impress the dudes that need to be impressed. And so I take, and I've mentioned this before, I take some spring practice reports with a grain of salt because it is incredibly similar in tone, in delivery to National Signing Day, where it is, we did everything that we were trying to do. All these very important things that we needed to get done, we got them done. We're better today than we were tomorrow, yada, yada, yada. It's the same thing as, we got our guy, and we definitely didn't miss out on any recruits. And if somebody signed and said they had us in their top 5, well, actually, we stopped recruiting them. It's always the same delivery of, at the end of the day, I want you to know what I want you to know. What I want you to know is, we worked really hard, we got better, etc. And fans can feel all warm and fuzzy on the inside when they look at that and say, like, okay, because even if the performance in a spring game, and damn near everybody has now a spring game, like very rarely is it we're so banged up, we're not going to have a spring game. And now they're like, Fox is going to have Ohio State and Michigan spring games on national TV. So they are a big deal. Even after the performance of a spring game, if you as a fan were watching, like, I don't think we ran the football that well, or we didn't get enough pressure on the passer, or whatever the case may be, when at the press conference after the spring game, somebody's going to be asked, like, so what do you still need to work on going into fall camp? And like, I feel really good defensively about how blah, blah, blah. I guess maybe not never. It's very rarely we got to get more pressure on the passer, or our linebackers didn't play very well in coverage. It's generally like, what? I think we're feeling pretty good about how things went there in spring practice. And then we'll get through the summer and maybe see if we can improve ourselves in the transfer portal here during the summer and blah, blah. It's very rarely going to give you a straight up, like, what? I don't think we're good enough at left tackle or whatever the case may be. It's just never going to be that singled out. And that's okay. But I think you just have to know, one, you have to go into spring practice from a fan's perspective of like, okay, here's my program. Here's where we are. Like, and you have to be somewhat realistic about it, because if you feel like we are a program on the rise, or we're an already established program, or my coach isn't on the hot seat, then you're going to have differing opinions at the end of those practices of how you look, where you look, what you look like, and how you feel about going into the season. Because if you're not honest with yourself going into spring practice, your whole mind gets warped on just what and how this was going to look and was supposed to look like. And if you overshoot it, if you think that you're better than you actually are and all of those things, nothing good comes from it. So spring practice is somewhat kind of this sobering reminder of like where we are as a program, where we are talent-wise, where we are as coaches, etc. And that's not always the funnest thing to confront at the end of the day. But it is, it's the celery stick of the college football world, where you just need that palate cleanser of like, okay, here's what we are, here's who we are, here's where we are as a program. And do I like that as a fan? That answer's up to you. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing. So if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you are listening on a podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory.